One thing that won't happen this year, the Seahawks for the first time in a decade will not have a winning record. Their best finish possible is 8-9. They've got the Lions coming to town this weekend for their home finale for the 2021 season, and that's a significant game because it quite possibly will be the last time we see Russell Wilson playing at Lumen Field in Seattle in a uniform that the home team wears. I guess he could be back at some point in the future, just not as a member of the Seahawks. Here he is yesterday addressing his potentially uncertain future as a member of the team.
I know for me personally, I hope it's not my last game, but, at the same time, I know it won't be my last game in the NFL. So I'm just focused on the day, and getting better today. And so that's my focus. That's my goal. I love the city and I love this, this moment. So, I love these guys. And so we got to make sure we get better today. That's the only thing that matters.
Peter, just the mere fact that he would say the words, I hope it's not my last game, it validates all of the talk, all of the speculation, all of the rumors, everything he said back in February. I mean, if he felt the way he did when he unloaded his complaints on the Dan Patrick Show after a 12-4 season, well, he's not going to feel any better after a losing season, the first one of his career. How can you feel any better about the team after what he's seen this season? And for him to say those words, look, it's not like the Seahawks are thinking about moving on from him. It's about him thinking that he would move on from the Seahawks. So he's managed to compartmentalize these realities far differently than Aaron Rodgers has. Aaron Rodgers has just kind of lived with his truth, well, some aspects of his truth, as it relates to his football situation. Truth otherwise is a different issue. But Russell Wilson's done this Batman thing where, in the regular season, he's mild-mannered Bruce Wayne, and then when in the offseason, he's doing everything he can to drive the Batmobile out of town. And the Batmobile's starting to rev up. And I think what he said yesterday is him softly putting his foot on the pedal and making sure the engine's ready to go.
Look, the weirdest thing, there's a lot of weird stats about this NFL season, but to me, the weirdest one is this. There are 3 teams in the NFL right now that are tied with the worst conference record right now in the NFL at 2-8. One is Jacksonville, one is Detroit, the other is Seattle. And the Seahawks have to be thinking. I know Pete Carroll said the other day that, hey, listen, we're not thinking that we have to revolutionize everything. We're going to come back strong, Pete being Pete, the power of positive thinking, Pete. But look, they've got a lot of decisions to make about their franchise. And I think one of the decisions is whether they want to try to have a full reboot and to rebuild their team around DK Metcalf and maybe some of the young players, and maybe sign Quandre Diggs and have Jamal Adams hopefully come back after the incredible investment they have made in him. But they got to make a decision on Bobby Wagner too. But no one knows what that decision is. This organization, relatively speaking, has been a sphinx about what they're thinking about for the future. So we'll see. But all I know is that last year, Russell Wilson rattled the cages, and there was a lot of upset people in Seattle, and in Seattle behind the closed doors inside the Seahawks. And you're absolutely right. It's been a lot worse this year. So what do you think Russell Wilson is thinking? Mike, one of my questions about Russell Wilson, though, is let's look at the teams that really might be interested in Russell Wilson. And I don't know. This is all just throwing darts right now. But you have to ask yourself if you're Russell Wilson. And let's say, I'm not even saying the New York Giants would be, but let's just say the New York Giants offered him both ones this year and a one in 23 or whenever, okay? They offer him 3 ones. If you're Russell Wilson, I mean, do you look at the New York Giants and say, oh, my God, I'm bringing the Giants back to the top? Maybe he does. I don't know. But what are the teams? Do you want to go to New Orleans with a horrible cap situation? where you really don't know what the future of that franchise is. I mean, it's just, I'm not sure that the grass is going to be greener on the other side if you go to a bad team. Now, Wilson is Joe Optimist. He always has been. And maybe he will look at it in a different way. We'll see.
That's an excellent point, though, Peter, because I firmly believe that what Tom Brady was able to do last year with the Buccaneers messed up a lot of franchises and a lot of franchise quarterbacks and got them thinking, I want to do the same thing, where I pick my next spot, I set my own table, I go to a place where the table is set with everything but me, and we go have a great special season and maybe win a Super Bowl. But that's the problem. Where is that spot for Russell Wilson or for Aaron Rodgers? I mean, Denver is becoming kind of that attraction. Right. Well, between Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, which guy are you going to want? I mean, you're going to get more years out of Russell Wilson, but there are real questions about Wilson after this season. I hope the explanation is his finger, because he had 3 horrible underthrows in that game against the Rams that was moved to a Tuesday night. He doesn't move like he used to, Peter. He doesn't have the mobility that we see in the young quarterbacks that zip all over the place and buy extra time. He's morphing into a pocket passer simply because he doesn't run like he once did. And if he can't throw the ball accurately like he once did, and hopefully the offseason he'll get back to where he was once that finger's fully healed. But, it's been a down year for him. And I hope the explanation is it's because of the injury, because if it's not the injury, he's starting to slip at the age of 33. He's as old as Matthew Stafford. That's what was so stunning to me after that most recent Seahawks-Rams game. They were born the same year. It feels like Stafford's been around a lot longer than Russell Wilson. They are the same age at 33. He knows the clock is ticking on his career. He said he wants 3 more Super Bowl wins. Where do you go to get him? Where's the team where you walk right through the door and you become a juggernaut? I'm not sure that there is one.
Look, let's remember one thing for everybody who would recreate history and redraw the boundary lines of history around Tom Brady's move to Tampa. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2019 were 7-7 entering the last 2 weeks of the season. They weren't going to make the playoffs, but they had a very good chance at finishing 9-7. They were playing 2 games at home, Houston and Atlanta. The Bucs are better than both teams at that time. And Jameis Winston threw 6 interceptions in those 2 games, including a walk-off in overtime in the last throw he ever made as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer to lose. So they finished 7-9. And I kept saying, this is, I'm not saying a sleeping giant, but this is not your father's Tampa Bay. This is a good team that has a chance to win quickly. And look, I'm not saying that's why Brady took it there. I think there are other places he would have rather gone. I think he would have rather gone to Indianapolis and who knows where else. But
San Francisco was his first choice, and they said no thanks.
Yeah, and you look at it, and you look at Tampa, and you've got 2 excellent receivers. You've got 2 very good tight ends. You've got a young and growing offensive line, which was buttressed a month after Brady signed with the best tackle in that draft, Tristan Wirfs, who's been fantastic on the right side of that line. And look, it's not fluky what the Bucs have done when you get a competent quarterback who doesn't make a lot of mistakes. That's what this game is. Who makes the fewest mistakes usually wins. I look at the Denver Broncos as the pot of gold. They will be 2022's Tampa Bay because they've got a lot of talent. They've got a decent offensive line. They've got some real players on defense. They've got a pretty good secondary. If Bradley Chubb can stay on the field, they've got a good outside rush guy. Denver is where I'd want to go if I want to go, and I'm Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson.
But here's the problem. You're jumping into a division that has Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and we don't know what's going to happen with the Raiders. First, they got to hire a coach. Mark Davis hasn't even shown any inclination to start interviewing coaches, even though he's in the window where he can. that was one of the teams that Russell Wilson had on his short list last year. Now, it was different. John Gruden was the coach, but once the game of coaching musical chairs comes to an end, then we have a better sense of where some of these quarterbacks may want to go. Wouldn't it be something if both Rodgers and Wilson ended up with the Broncos and the Raiders respectively, and you have Herbert and Mahomes in the division? But still, there isn't that spot where everything is lining up perfectly. So back to the point you originally made, Peter, and I think it's a good one. Where's Russell Wilson going to go where he's going to feel like he's got that edge? He's got that opportunity. Things are stacked in his favor like they were for Tom Brady. Other than Denver, and even in Denver, I'm not so sure it's like it was 2 years ago. But that's the closest thing you're going to have to a Tampa Bay 2 years after the fact. I got one more Seahawks question for you before we take a break. Because we don't know what Jody Allen, the owner of the Seahawks, is going to do. When Paul Allen, her brother, died, she inherited his entire portfolio, and he has massive holdings. And there's a company called Vulcan Incorporated that runs everything. And no one knows how involved she is. No one knows how engaged she is. There was a report from NFL Network a few weeks ago that she's upset about what's happening and she's paying attention. We don't know whether or not that's going to result in any serious reaction when the season ends. If, however, she would fire Pete Carroll. You know, we talk about Mike Tomlin from time to time. Steelers fans get upset. Well, you know what? If you ever fire him, he's going to land somewhere else, possibly in your division the next day.
If 5 minutes.
Pete Carroll would give, where does Pete Carroll fall on that scale? Because we've seen plenty of guys get fired and get hired right away who you would think and say, well, why they get a job again? Does Pete Carroll land somewhere in this cycle if he gets fired by the Seattle Seahawks, in your opinion?
The question is, he's going to have to convince an owner that he's got Ponce de Leon in his back pocket, that he'll coach. He would coach next year at age 71. Do you want to hire a coach who's going to start his tenure with your team at age 71, even though he seems like he's 55? I totally get it, but there is a birth certificate with Pete Carroll. And you have to wonder, I don't think he'd be anywhere near as attractive as Mike Tomlin, but I do think he'd have a very good chance of getting a job in what I would call a watered-down, starless crop of potential new coaches for 2022.
Pete, this is the best comparison I can think of, and Pete Carroll reminds me of the mob boss who puts on a robe and acts feeble when he's in court, and then the moment that he's cleared, he's back to being the badass mob boss, although it's in reverse. Like, if you see Pete Carroll anywhere else, he looks every bit of 70. The moment he steps onto or anywhere near a football field, he's half his age. So if you want to convince an owner that Pete Carroll is as spry as Grandma in Bad Santa, show the tapes of Pete Carroll at a game. Because isn't he? He's a different guy on the sideline, jumping around, running around, throwing the ball before the games, and then he morphs into a completely different person as soon as he leaves the stadium. It's an amazing transformation.
Yeah, I've sat with Pete Carroll. He really is young at heart, very much so. And he firmly believes in that. He eats in a pristine fashion. His body is a temple. I have great admiration for Pete Carroll and how he takes care of himself. It's fantastic. He's a model for the future. And it could be that an owner will say, hey, I'm just looking at the guy I see. He looks unbelievable. And maybe he won't consider his age. But I don't know how you couldn't consider his age. If you were going to go after him and perhaps try to hire him.
I'm fascinated by Chicago as a destination for Pete Carroll and for John Schneider if they do a clean sweep in Seattle. That's one that has just kind of stuck in my mind all week long, that if the Bears clean house, they could do a hell of a lot worse than Pete Carroll and John Schneider for a team that has struggled to be relevant in recent years, and Schneider and Carroll have been relevant every year that they've been with the Seahawks.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights From NBC Sports.